What up, Facebook Live family friends? The Hatted Therapist is back again with another rendition of Let's Talk to Really Cool People in the Field of Therapy. Here we are with a person I've known pretty much my whole life. She is just a great human, and we are so excited that she's here. So, Anne, if you could, please, in a second here, take it away. This is Elliot Andre at Connected Roots. Here's Anne. If you could introduce yourself and let us know who you are and what you do, that'd be awesome.
Okay, that's great. Hi, my name is Anne Lidsky, and I am one of the support group leaders for the Les Turner ALS Foundation in Skokie, which supports research and patient support for those who are dealing with ALS.
Very cool.
I've been with the group doing this support group for almost 40 years, 39 years now. And I got very connected with it because of my own personal experience. So if you'd like me to share that, I'm happy to share that story.
Please, please. I think all our viewers out there would love to know from your own personal experience how ALS has affected you and how you've grown to deal with that in your life and cope with that as well. I think that'd be very helpful.
Okay, I'll share with you that in the early 1960s, when I was a teen, my mom began to trip. We had no idea. I'd say, "Mom, what did you fall over? There's nothing on the floor." And she was just not sure, but she was getting weaker in her walk. And then she would say, "Anne, can you help me with small things?" Couldn't open a safety pin. Suddenly we began to see and hear that her voice was changing. And in those days, and I still even think today, there was a time initially that there would be a misdiagnosis. Was it a tiny stroke? They certainly didn't say anything about ALS.
Okay.
When the diagnosis did come through, I will tell you for sure, I was 15, had never heard of ALS, never heard of Lou Gehrig's disease. And we were told at that time that she would have 3 to 5 years possibly to live. We were shocked. My dad was not well himself, often not able to be home. And so my older brother, and not much older, and then a little sister, and I began to do what we could do for my mom. The unfortunate part at that time was there was no support group. There wasn't a foundation. In fact, the physicians, the doctors themselves, had no idea on how to guide you. So we were very much on our own. Picking her up when she fell, calling the fire department when she would fall, when her voice began to go and it was very hard to understand her. There was nothing. We were creating devices. And of course, we were young.
Right.
So my memories would be my mom in bed, and we gave her a little bell when she totally lost her voice and was really totally bedridden. She'd be able, with just a little movement of her hand, to ring the bell.
Okay.
That would mean she would need something. So I would come in and say, "Mom, what do you need?" And it might be she would motion to something. Maybe I had to move her elbow. She was uncomfortable. So I'd say, "Is there anything you need, Mom? Anything else before I leave?" I was doing homework. I was a high school student. And no sooner did I walk a few steps down the hall and the bell would ring again. Now I'd come back in. First time I would come back in, I was pretty patient, maybe even the second time. And by the third time, I would come in not understanding. It makes me sad to even think about it, that she needed just not to be alone. And because we weren't really talking about it, the doctor said, "Don't tell your mom what she has."
Wow.
It will be too upsetting.
Okay.
So at that time, in the 60s, we thought that was the thing to do. Exercise with her and tell her she's going to get better. It was the worst advice.
Yeah.
Because she knew that something was so terribly wrong, but didn't want to say anything to us because she didn't want to upset us. She was trying to stay with Mom. And we didn't want to say anything to her. I'd say, "Let's see if we can get you to squeeze a ball." And eventually she began to have terrible difficulty with swallowing.
Sure.
And so her breathing became affected, and we went rushing off to the hospital. And she eventually had a trach
Sure.
because she needed some help and a feeding tube. Again, they didn't have products like they have today.
Right.
So I would whip up something in chicken broth in a blender and pour it down this tube that went directly into her stomach. We were on our own. We
Right.
really, we needed help, but had no idea who to turn to.
Sure.
And so it was a very frightening, lonely journey.
Yeah.
Eventually, because she needed this equipment of suctioning the trach, and
Yeah.
again, financially, this is a serious problem for families. We
Absolutely.
did not have the funds. My dad was hospitalized in another hospital for heart disease, and
Wow.
we were dependent on relatives or family service to just help us cover the rent, let alone
Yeah.
to be able to have someone in the house. So she was eventually placed in a nursing home. And
Got it.
at that time, too, it was not great. And we struggled because we knew that the treatment, not that they were ill treating her, but they could not give her, she could no longer speak. There was no way for her
Right.
to communicate. And she passed away after 3 years of a terrible struggle,
Sure. Yeah.
So when in almost 40 years ago, I'm listening to the radio and I hear that there is a music mart. It was a collection of old records for the Les Turner ALS Foundation to
Okay.
help families with ALS. First
Wow.
time that I heard that there was such a foundation. And I made a
Wow.
phone call right away. I had gone on to get my doctorate in psychology. I felt that I knew how to work with people, and
Yeah.
plus I had this experience. So I called to see if I could just volunteer, meet with people, see if I can help, especially children, young adult,
Yeah.
teenagers. And then they said, we would like to have a support group. Would you help us interviewing? And so I began to help
Okay.
interviewing. And then after a couple of interviews, at that time, the executive director turned to me and said, would you just please be our support group leader?
Right.
That was kind of it. It was like a little bit of a light bulb.
Right. Right.
And so we created, at that time, it was a support group only for caregivers,
Got it.
not yet the patients, because we felt that patients now were beginning to get some extra help that they had not had before, but caregivers were out there struggling on their own.
Sure.
And so we sent a letter to all the families we knew. We invited caregivers, and at first it was very quiet. No one wanted to say anything. We sat in a circle, and finally one person, a gentleman whose wife had ALS, said, no, I love my wife. No matter what I do, I'm not doing it right. And
Sure.
he began to cry.
Sure.
And it opened the door for others to share how hard it was to be a caregiver,
Absolutely.
not understanding because they so wanted to stay focused on their loved one with ALS
Right.
that they didn't realize how exhausting emotionally it was for them.
Totally.
And so then the conversation, and from then and now, 39 years later, I feel I have an important role to talk to people. And now we have caregivers and people with ALS who
Sure.
come once a month to the group that I am with a co-leader to offer support. It is open. They don't sign up for any given time. We meet for approximately an hour and a half.
Cool.
And we welcome everyone in with the focus on developing healthy communication.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's the title of our talk. I mean, it makes sense. You got it. You're hitting such a note here that, people in this community generally, like, I don't feel like there's space for that. So I think providing this with the Les Turner ALS Foundation is unbelievable. And for 39 years to sustain a group that has a lot of people, I'm sure, that come regularly is unbelievable. I mean, that is mind blowing to me, because that, just the amount of support and passion that you have and that people have to come and be vulnerable in a space like this, it's beautiful, honestly. really.
And I think because of what I went through, or my
Yes.
family really went
Hmm.
through, and we didn't have anyone, had we had someone, a
Right.
social worker, anyone at all, to say, let your mom know how much you love her.
Yeah.
Let her know when you're frustrated because you're
Hmm.
doing your best. Let her tell you whatever it is that she needs to share. That in the best of healthy relationships, communication's important, right?
Absolutely.
And it could be complicated under any normal circumstance. And this is that much more complicated. So, for example, when a family member wants to help a loved one who is struggling with ALS, and they jump up to help them put, let's say, put their coat on.
Hmm.
And the person with ALS may go, I want to do it myself. I want to remain, please don't help me.
Hmm.
So then the person steps back and the next time is hesitant to offer the help. And
Right.
now the person is struggling and in their frustration may turn to them and say, why didn't you help me? And
Hmm.
so this is the time when people have to sit down together because it is a disease that impacts the entire family system.
Absolutely.
Everyone is impacted, right?
Hmm.
And so this healthy communication for a caregiver to say, I love you with all my heart. And sometimes I'm frustrated. I
Right.
know I might not understand what you're saying to me if someone's voice is impacted,
Right.
but I want to be patient and I want you to forgive me if I lose my patience. And
Hmm.
for the person with ALS who sometimes loses their patience, like I've told you 3 times what I wanted to say, but it's not clear.
Right.
And for them to be able to also say, I want to thank you for what you do for me,
Hmm.
or to express um, fear that they may have, not to be afraid to talk.
Right.
And I think sometimes we think we're protecting one another, but it's
Hmm.
actually closing doors.
Right.
When
Putting
someone
walls up. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if they want to talk about a fear of one day not being here, very often the loved one will say, don't talk like that. You have to
Right.
remain
Of course.
positive. And yet at the same time, we want to say, I'm here for you to, I'll talk with you about anything. I'll be a good listener.
Right.
And to be able also to help one another, if there are siblings, to be
Right.
open to talk to one another, because sometimes there the communication doesn't work. People have different ways of interacting, and one sibling may feel their way might be the right way, and
Right.
yet
Of course.
we accept each other's strengths, and where one person feels a little stronger, they may be able to call and say, I've got this week. Why
Right.
don't you focus on your family and let's reconnect? And I think people are walking a little bit on eggshells that they
Hmm.
don't need to do. And also to be a bit forgiving of
Right.
themselves.
Totally. Have compassion for themselves. Try not to
Exactly.
avoid the difficult situations. I mean,
Right.
you're hitting on many like therapeutic techniques for all the listeners
Exactly.
out there. Thumbs up. I mean, like seriously, this is amazing information that we need to know. I mean, we can't
Right.
avoid. We need to have the hard conversations. We need to feel the feels. That's okay. We know how to
It-
cope with that.
right.
We
Exactly.
can't
And
we can't
you
be in
know,
a place of providing false hope in that
exactly.
regard.
And when you say 39 years, over those years, of course, I've met many, many families. And over
Hmm.
those years, we've lost people.
Of course.
People will say to me, Anne, does it not bring back some difficult memories? And I always share with them that they are the most uplifting moments in my month.
Totally.
They are people that are dealing with ALS, are courageous, are positive. They are learning to live with it, make
Mhm.
every day count,
Yeah.
look at the quality, appreciate, smell the roses, not allow those small things, not to sweat about those small things anymore.
Right.
And I have learned so much. They have enriched my life. They have taught me to live a fuller life. And I've come to love them. And I think what happens in a support group now, when people come together, their first beginning when they see each other after a month is they want to check in and say, how are you doing?
Right.
They are more concerned with helping each other at that moment than they are necessarily about themselves. And so they form their own community new friendships.
Yeah.
They are people who will be in touch with each other, often through email. They share ideas, something that they may not have learned from a physician or the clinic that they're going to. And yet at home, someone devised a new way to hold that fork with a steadfast hand, and they share it. And I'm amazed at the kindness and the thoughtfulness of these very special people. It's why
Yeah.
I continue to love doing this job.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
you're speaking to such an amazing part of mental health and in the world of group therapy. I mean, it's a
Yes.
support group is a form of group therapy. And in
It
my own practice, and Lauren
absolutely
and I have group, and we see the power of that, and we are pushing for it so much in this world for people to understand that this is a safe, comfortable, beautiful, and welcoming space for not just ALS patients, but people dealing with so many other things in their lives.
Exactly. Support groups, right, for many, many situations.
Yeah.
And then people feel also they're not so alone. They
Right.
are encouraged. Sometimes someone will talk to me on the phone before coming to a support group, and they're a bit concerned that they will see someone more advanced than they are if they are early diagnosed.
Right.
But what they find is that when they meet people who are perhaps more advanced, they realize that they will be able to adjust. It's always a new norm. So someone used to say to me, how are you coping with it? I go, first of all, there's no choice. But
Right, of course.
secondly, it's a new norm. This is another new a moment for us to be more loving, more present with each other, to treasure every single moment. That we all think we may have many, many, many years. And so the moments when we want to sit down and really tell people what they mean to us, and you think, oh, you know what? I have a lot of time. I'll do that next week, next month. And this tells us that we have a window. We may not know how long that window is. We have people who have had ALS for 10, 12 years. It's that 2 to 5 or 3 to 5 is sometimes very misleading, and I think also not terribly helpful.
Right, of course. To
You
put a
never
time
want
limit on something, yeah.
Exactly, to put time limit on anyone's life. But I think people have said, we're going to travel now. We're going to spend more time with children, with grandchildren.
Exactly.
And it teaches all of us. It teaches all of us a very solid lesson. These they are, it's a gift. People thank me for what I do, and I thank them for allowing me to be part of their lives.
Absolutely. I have a colleague and friend who I just met recently through doing what I'm doing right now when I interviewed my father, and he told his story of ALS, and he reached out and he was like, my dad also. Give me a second. It brings a little emotion, but
I know.
Yeah. So he reached out and he was like, the last 3 years of my dad's life were the best years we ever had together.
Right. Exactly.
I was like,
yeah,
man. It's great.
People are so busy in their lives, and they just simply don't realize. People always say, if you were given 6 months to live, what would you do? People think, oh, I'll travel around the world. And what they really want to do is spend time with the people they love.
Exactly.
And the foundation offers so much support in way of respite care and lending equipment. And
right.
I think this connection that we have, and people are able to go home and say, I'm really sorry I lost my temper. I'm sorry that I wasn't as patient as I should have been.
Right.
And people they're accepting of that. If I could have said to my mom, you are just the best mom I could have ever wanted. But I was afraid to say that because I thought it would be too emotional for her, as if I were saying goodbye. And yet I think she would have wanted to hear that. And I would have wanted to be able to say it. And so now I've been given, in a way, a second chance by helping other families, by encouraging them to share how they feel in a loving, supportive, kind way. Kiss them until they go, oh my goodness.
Leave me alone.
Alone. Enough with the kissing.
Right.
You're right. And people, listen, could live to 100, and their family members just always took it for granted they would be there and
Right, of course.
did not spend that kind of quality time.
Right.
And
Quality time is everything.
right, you know what? And Elliot, I say to patients, which I believe, that the people who are doing research, these brilliant minds looking for cause and cure, could really be in another field where that it's much easier to find a cause or cure of something else. But I think they believe so strongly that they are so close.
Totally.
And that's why they, all around the world internationally, these researchers and physicians are so devoted because they know that they will find that cause and cure. They know it.
People are determined.
Staying in their job. They're very determined and devoted. And I think the ALS community, the physicians and the researchers also share. And so if something is found across the world in Japan, we'll know about it here in this country. And people have to kind of hold on and work to make that day a good day. And if the one day wasn't so good, the next day will be a little bit better. And to learn to, advocate for themselves. And there's never a silly question, never a silly, if someone says, I'm struggling, we say to our people, don't ever think for a moment, if you're struggling, that you would say to yourself, like, I guess this is what I have to deal with. You have to make a call to wherever you're living, to wherever the clinic, the physician, and say, this is a new struggle, because there is bound to be something to help with that.
Or somebody else.
Yes.
Yeah, somebody else who can empathize with them in that situation.
Exactly. Yeah. And so to speak up and put yourself as best as you can, allow yourself to go out, let friends, I say to people, let friends help you. They want to help you. People say, oh, I don't want to bother anyone. It's not a bother. People are they're hungry to be able to help.
And if they don't, then they'll tell you, right? You would think that's healthy communication. Yeah.
Exactly. If they're not able to, they'd be happy. They would certainly say, I'm not able to do that. But in most of the time, they're feeling so powerless that when you're given a task to do, they are just thrilled to be able to do that. So it's all the encouragement that goes on in a support group, I think really has impacted the lives in such a productive, positive way. And people come back every month. They continue to come back. And if someone isn't there, we are reaching out. Everyone wants to know, how is everyone?
Totally.
It is such a wonderful opportunity to share and know that you're not alone and to learn from one another.
And you've formed an incredible group. Honestly, I mean, from what you're describing, I think everybody should be in something like this. If they can be, in that regard.
If they can. And I think because there are most often two of us, we often try within that group to take some of that time for the hour and a half that we're together, that people with ALS, who we call PALs, the patients, they will be in one room, and then the caregivers are in another location for a little while, so that people can ask the questions or share a concern without the concern that they may be upsetting someone by the question.
Sure.
So if someone fears the future, but they don't want to upset their loved one, and they stay quiet, they can, within the group of caregivers together, as well as folks with ALS. And that too has been very helpful.
Totally. Framing the group in that way to allow the non-judgmental or self-judgment of asking a question that might bring something up in somebody else.
Exactly.
Very important in that regard.
Yeah. And sometimes it does take a phone call to talk to someone who might be a little bit worried about what is a support group and will it overwhelm me? And usually once they taste the experience, even the snowstorms in Chicago, keeps
right.
out in the snow. Yeah,
it's a real honor.
It's a real honor for me.
It's extremely powerful.
And it's just so terrific what you're doing and being able to bring an awareness. Really, I'm honored to be part of this.
We got to, right? We have to. We have to make sure, people know about what's happening in the world, because if they don't, then they don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. And if you don't know, you can't take advantage of anything. And
exactly.
And I would assume this is a free support group, right?
Yes. Oh, there's never a charge.
Right.
Never.
And
Yes.
for people just to show up is a big moment, so for them to be able to do that and for you to be there and support and guide this process, I think is such a wonderful thing. And before we wrap up, I just want to thank you again for all the hard work you've done. It's really touches a nerve in my own life with my own father and my own family. So thank you so much. And I appreciate you being here. And if there's any information, Anne, that you could provide us really quick before we head out, about how to get involved in the support group or where it is, or if there's a link we can put down at the bottom for people to sign up for it or something, I think that'd be really helpful.
Right. Well, if they're in the Chicago area, it's very easy to contact the Les Turner ALS Foundation, which is located in Skokie. We have several support groups. So we have support groups for the western suburbs, the city, as well as Skokie, which takes care more of the northern suburbs or the north part of the city. But there, for folks who are in other states, other cities, if they were to ask their primary, the neurologist, often the teaching hospitals, small clinics, there are support groups all over the country.
Good.
Very often through the Muscular Dystrophy Association, they will also offer support groups for ALS. And so if people who are listening or are connected here and they are living out of state, it is worth to Google, is there a support group for ALS in my area? And it will come up, and I encourage people, give it a try. Give it a try.
Right there with you.
It's a lifeline. It's a lifeline.
Yep, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So for people to go out and do that, I firmly believe and push for that. So again, thanks. One more question. I don't know if this is something that you would know off the top of your head, but if somebody can't use an automobile or doesn't have a support person to take them somewhere in Skokie or the western suburbs, do they provide that?
Yes.
Stores?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
That's
so that
awesome.
if someone cannot, we have all different kinds of transportation to be able to help people. We are devoted to these families for whatever it is that they need.
That's amazing.
So if
seriously,
they call the foundation and all they have to do is ask the question,
good.
It's there. There are grants.
Just
there
ask.
is so much available through it. Exactly.
Amazing.
Not to be shy. Not to be shy.
Absolutely.
So.
Incredible. I again appreciate you being here. All our friends out there, thumbs up if you know somebody, or heart or kissy face if you know somebody out there who has ALS, and if this would be a good thing to share with them. I think it would be I'd be super thankful. I know Anne would be as well, that if you could do that, to just provide support for people out there. Goodbye, all our Facebook friends and family. And again, appreciate you. And we'll see you next time.
I want you to give a kiss to that wonderful dad of yours. And
I will. Absolutely.
All these years.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you so much for what you've done. So thanks again, everybody. Till next time, Headed Therapist is out. Catch you all later. Bye now.
Bye-bye.